Hello, and welcome back to our lecture on Chapter 6, Experimental Research Methods. In this lecture, I'll talk about experimenter expectancy effect. Experimental expectancy effect is where characteristics of the actual experimenter themselves influences the results of the study. In particular, sometimes the experimenter who's conducting the study may have a physiological characteristic, such as their age, their gender, their race, or a psychological characteristic in terms of the way they treat participants, like hostility, anxiety, introversion, that can actually influence our participants' responses. This, of course, could be a confounding variable for your research. So you may want to consider some of the following procedures in order to control for experimental expectancy issues. One of the easiest things you can do to control for this is to use what are called standardized methods. That is, when you have a specific script that you follow for each research study. That is, people start off with the same greeting, they then move into the informed consent in the same manner, then they move into the demographic paper in the same manner. By standardizing the whole process of carrying out the procedure, you help prevent individual differences such as friendliness or maybe being a little bit short or brash with your participants. You prevent that from happening in the interactions between your experimenter and your participants. The other thing you can do is when you use multiple experimenters to conduct the research, you want to make sure that you actually engage in a training process before you send them out into the field. That way, you know that they're using the standardized methods in the way they are intended to use them. Other things you can do is you can standardize the experimenter's appearances, attitudes, by asking them to engage with participants in the same way, and then of course practicing that during the training procedures. How do you know if you've had an experimenter expectancy effect? Well, one of the things that we do within science, of course, is that we replicate studies. And so if the findings are able to be replicated with a different experimenter, then you know that experimental expectancy effects are either not a factor or not much of a factor in the results. One of the easiest ways to know if one of these experimental expectancies could be problematic for your study is to actually go through the literature. A thorough literature review will reveal any confounding variables related to experimental expectancies. One of the ways that you want to standardize procedures is by preparing instructions in advance in terms of how to greet participants, how to walk participants through the study. And when you do this, you want to make sure that all instructions are objective and concrete. And the easiest way to check this is to run what we call a pilot study before your experiment. A pilot test or a pilot study is where you actually run your procedures on a smaller, more controlled group in order to find where there are errors or issues in your study. This is something that I highly recommend you do for your third study before you finalize your procedures and actually run your experiments. Another way that's a little bit more high-tech to control your experimental expectancies effects is to use technology. Originally, they would suggest that you tape record instructions to have them played to participants. Now, of course, we would say you probably want to have the procedures up on a computer or have a computer video or something prompt participants. That way you know that they're hearing the instructions in the same manner. You can, of course, also print instructions. This is what I choose to do when I ask my classes to run research as part of classes. I have those packets that I put together for you that have all the instructions on there in order to try and prevent some of the experimental expectancy effects. Obviously, I've already mentioned computer displays can do a similar thing for you by having a set of procedures and have them timed and have them run automatically. So by now, I hope you understand experimental expectancy effect and how to control for it.